Wait, did it go live?
Yes, we did.
And we're apparently live with our 283rd episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on social media, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on social media. Seth, say hi.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. Excited to be here as usual. Just a couple of announcements before we get into vulnerable MCPs, some hallucinations of projects, and other things. I did want to drop in that we will be running a practical secure code review AI enhanced version virtually on May 12th and 13th. We have sold some seats to that. Looking for others. This is an opportunity to actually take that secure code review course. We do not currently have other offerings in play for secure code review, so would love to see you there. If you have questions about it, please reach out. Both Ken and I are on Slack, but would love to see you there. And then on top of that, harnessing LLMs for application security. We are going to get a code to actually reduce the price on that a little bit for current listeners of the podcast. Will be at DEF CON Las Vegas. So it's going to be after DEF CON, the week after DEF CON. Let me grab the link to that. You can see details on our training site, or if you go to training.defcon.org, we are listed there as well. But we will be getting a code for that if you are interested. We'll be promoting and would love to have more people there. We've got to hit certain minimums by the end of May in order to teach that course. So please reach out if that's one that you are interested on. The harnessing one is going to be fun. Basically, everything that Ken and I are doing on a daily basis continues to change that course, as far as like tips and tricks and other things that we are finding useful. And I know I've pulled some of like what Ken has recommended in that into my daily life, and right, like it's just very helpful from an AppSec perspective on how to utilize LLMs to improve your overall process. Besides that, I do want to give a shout out to Dry Run Security for sponsoring this episode. I'm going to give Ken just a minute to talk about what they're doing there. What recent improvements they are seeing, and then we'll jump into the articles. So Dry Run.
No. So I think basically we released 4 separate bake-offs against some of the major companies. I started working on more bake-offs with different companies. Immediately got blocked because I guess they saw me sign up and they knew what I was going to do. And in any case, but those comparisons really show where we're at, which is we find all the stuff that every other SaaS tool misses. New approach, different way of doing things, new technology. Of course, we can do a lot better and have. But I think we've made a lot of improvements. Everything from faster runs and faster scans to we use these natural language code policies, NLCPs. They're very cool. We're seeing people like some examples, and actually we did post our docs site publicly recently. So let me give this link to our natural language code. We have some default ones that we give people to get started with that they can try, but you'll see the types of questions that we sorry, wrong link. Here's the right link. Sorry, these are the starter pack NLCPs. So yeah, you can just see we ask things like everything from like, hey, do I have problems with my GitHub action code being actions code being implemented? Do I have third-party scripts being included in like maybe a content security policy being changed? Is there any PII exposure? And then you just apply those to the repo or repositories you want. And we go either into the source code and check for the things we need to validate it, or if the PR has all the code we need, we stay there and just review that code. So long story short, those NLCPs have been helping people find things they can't write regex rules for, or easily find through like syntactic checks. So anyways,
Cool.
Lots of other features that we have released, lots of improvements every single day. Things are really taking off. It's up. Try us out.
Yep. Can't recommend it enough. So sweet. Thanks to Dry Run. As far as like locations that we're going to be, Ken and I will both be at B-Side San Francisco. We are hosting a panel with Lakshmi and Ariel on Sunday. Would love to see you there, besides sf.org. And then we'll be at RSA the following week. We're running Aegis of Tomorrow and hosting that, playing MC as we have, Jason Haddix and Daniel Miesler and Ken Wong are all going to speak about AI and AppSec and what's going on in the space. Get your questions in for both of those panels now. If you're interested in coming to the Aegis event, sign up. Seats are extremely limited, and we already have more people than we have more interest. So if you do want to be there and can guarantee that you will fill one of those seats, please reach out. We'll make sure that it happens. Outside of that, I think that's everything from an announcement perspective. Ken, should we start with the demo today, or do you want to dive into something else? Okay.
Let's do the demo and then just and I only want to show, okay, so how do I do this? Because I'm on a pretty big screen. So I'm going to try and make this not hard for people to view it. So let's go first to the damn vulnerable MCP server site. So I'm going to share that screen.
Yep.
All right.
I shared the link. So yep, here we go.
Awesome. Thank you for doing that. And I'll zoom in on the README here. So long story short, when you go and you run this command, you're going to start up obviously the server, the MCP server. But the caveat here is that the instructions, and this is why I wanted to show this, the instructions actually say, like, just open up. Sorry, let me find out where it actually does this. Let's see here. I think it might have been in the getting setup guide. Yeah. So if you go to the setup guide, there, and that's maybe my fault for going here first. I don't know, but in any case, for the setup guide, it tells you to download Claude Desktop or MCP Inspector. And I did download Claude Desktop, right? And I did follow these instructions. Where it says open desktop, click on connect to MCP server option, enter the URL. None of that actually existed, right? Out of the box, downloading from the official Claude's website, there was no like simple, and I'll show that in a second. There was no like simple connect to an MCP server. So there's a little bit of extra work you have to do here. And that's why I'm even doing a demo of how to get started with these challenges. Now, once it's set up, there is both a challenges guide and a solutions guide. So obviously there are levels to the challenges, and there are ways for you to, if you get stuck, get unstuck. That's basically the point. So let me stop sharing that for a moment, and then I'm going to share another tab that was really helpful. So I guess I could have maybe just kept that open, but we're here now. So in any case, so under the issues, because I was like, you'll see here in a moment why I had to find out this JSON blob, like what that is actually supposed to be. You'll see in a moment. But yeah, this was helpful. I went to the issues and looked for, any sort of like, how do you do this on Claude Desktop UI? And came to this issue, and it's got this nice little configuration. You're going to need this. I'll also think something I would say is that, believe it or not, my machine, I had recently switched to a new machine that did not have Node installed. So I had to do a brew install Node on my Mac. And then I had the npx command available. So if you see errors connecting with Claude and you're using this, it's probably that you don't have either npx installed or Node installed. All right. Let's see, what other housekeeping things. Yeah, let me just try to show you this real quick. So here's the problem. If you go to right, so this is the Claude app. This is like write a hello world function in Python, right? This is I'm on the free version here. The whole idea is it's like a ChatGPT kind of desktop app, right? That's what Claude Desktop is. But The problem is obviously like you don't, I mean, I didn't see like now this is available, but there was no like MCP tool. There was no like, there was no connect to I assumed connect to MCP server would be here or something like that. Now when I go into Claude settings, which you can't see, let me try to share that. It's definitely not fun trying to switch between all these options. So now like I have this developer tab open with this DVMC configuration. But what you'll notice is it, or probably won't notice because I'm not sharing the full screen, but if I hit edit config here, it's going to open up my file system and it's going to show me there's a JSON file, which I'll show you here in a moment. So, yep, sorry, switch between things. All right. So again, like when you just, I guess my point being, and when you just download Claude Desktop, there's not like a connect to MCP server. There's not like some easy config you can overwrite. This is actually how you have to do it. So now, apologies, I didn't do this on a Windows machine. So if you're on Windows, it's probably a little obviously different. But all right, uh, for Mac OS, you will not have the where is it? This, sorry. You won't have this file, Claude desktop config.json. That file will not be there when you install natively. So you have to create the file and then enter that whatchamacallit, this blob that I was telling you about into this JSON file. Then close, and of course make sure that you have like npx installed. Then close Claude desktop and reopen it, and then you should be able to start interacting with the MCP server. And let's see, last thing here is to is now you'll have these tools available where you can do things and you can follow along with the challenges from this point forward. And I just wanted to show everybody, I know this is probably not like, it's nothing mind blowing, right? But in terms of how to get set up, but I think that it's helpful, hopefully, to show you, um, you know, how to get started at least, right? So, okay, hopefully that's useful. Is there anything else I should show, Seth?
Yeah, I mean, like part of me wanted to talk through the different challenges that they actually, we don't have to like step through them or pull them, but the different things that they decided to include in the damn vulnerable MCP server, and why that is, right? So it looks like it's got API keys and other things that you're looking at there, right?
Yeah, and I
That
did
it'll
that just by
actually
like,
pull. Yeah,
yeah,
because that was the
that's
connector,
how I
right?
did it.
Like, so it's actually exposing those things, right? But if I look through the list of what else is there, because it's got things like basic prompt injection and permission scope, rug pulls, malicious code execution. I mean, this is all the stuff that we started to talk about even last week, right? Like the launch of like MCP is just like taken over the world the last month, right? Because it's an easy way to expose functionality to LLMs, but it's another attack surface. So, like, I appreciate that this is already out there and available because it seems fairly useful for people to recognize what's going on and what you've got to consider when you are exposing these tools to LLMs and then the LLM to the world in general, because a lot of that gets passed through. The other interesting attack that I saw specific to, oh, yeah, good job,
I just
Harish,
want to give a
right?
shout
Like,
out. Yeah, good job. Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, it is. It came out very quickly, and it's all very relevant. The more that I look at it, the more that I want to just dive in and play with it. And I'm going to be pushing this to some of my internal resources so that they understand what it is that we need to be watching for. Now, from a third party perspective, I don't see a lot of MCP stuff popping up yet, right? Like, we're still in the phase with most large companies that they're building chatbots, and that seems to be about it. Not necessarily using AI too heavily along these lines, but it's coming, right? Like this is all stuff that is going to be relevant. And along those lines, one of the recent blog posts from Here, I'm going to post this up. And I know it's not one that I pushed to you before, but I did see it this morning. And it goes right along these same lines, right? Trail of Bits released a blog yesterday about how to jump the line and actually build a malicious MCP server that gets called every single time that MCP is initiated, right? And it all has to do. I mean, it's a prompt engineering attack, right, or prompt injection attack that basically tells the LLM that this tool must be used for compliance reasons. If you go look at the actual prompt that is given and the description of the tool, embedded in it is a explanation to the LLM that it has to be run every single time for compliance reasons. And it has to be run first every single time. So they're able to actually start pulling data out of the LLM and the interactions that are going on for all of the other tools just based on the prompt, or not necessarily the prompt, but the description of the tool that is being provided to the LLM. Interesting attack, right? Super interesting in early days in the MCP world. But I love to see these sorts of interactions and how they break down, because it's all kind of unexpected territory for us. It isn't, we don't have good threat models yet, right? And it's all greenfield. I mean, I know you and I have talked quite a bit about, tooling and agentic AI, and MCP is kind of the natural response to that, a way to actually standardize. But now the attacks that go into it are not something that we've necessarily thought through, but it is maturing quickly.
Yeah, it's really cool to see. Yeah. I mean, man, MCP, I feel like it was like a second ago that we started hearing about it. Like, well, I say that, but it's probably 2 months ago. And then, like, man, there's already yeah, this is a damn vulnerable MCP server. There's already,
Mhm.
uh, some guidance out there, some security guidance out there. There's companies now talking about how they, like, I saw some companies talking about how they're like securing your MPC or MCP servers. It's crazy how, yeah, you're right. Things move really fast, really, really fast. So
Yeah,
I don't
it,
really
it
have any other
does.
comments, but you're right.
Yeah, yeah. Just be aware, right? And again, a lot of it goes back to the basics of AppSec and security in general, and how we actually handle data, how we actually do some sort of input validation, output encoding style, right? Validations of what's going on from users, what they're sending to us. That's where you need to be concerned. And the same thing goes, right? The next article that I want to highlight is the slop squatting one. Um,
Okay.
this is from the socket.dev people. I actually met a couple of them at B-Side Salt Lake City. They were in town for it. But this article is going into it. So it expands on some research that was released on Archive. I think we highlighted in one of the newsletters recently. Speaking of which, if you're not signed up for the newsletter, you should be. We do have additional articles and things that we actually push into that. I'm trying to find it though. It was a couple weeks ago. There was an Archive article that actually highlighted dependency hallucinations. Right? Dang it! I can't see it right now. I'll have to go find it. Right.
Okay.
But basically, they dove into hallucinations and what was going on, and how AIs and LLMs in general, when you're doing something like you just demonstrated, hey, build me a function, right, that does X, Y, and Z, that it will actually make up names of packages for Python, for Node, just based on what it thinks might actually be out there, right?
Yeah.
And this is I mean, as a developer, this is something that you may actually have done, especially early in your career, right? Like, oh, there must be a package named, left pad, for example, right? And you just import that library, and you don't realize that you're pulling it from a third party source, because it's not internal to your project. And the third party source, if somebody has hijacked that library, can actually inject code into your application. All right. So, I mean, it's a pretty standard attack. It's what we've talked about from a supply chain security perspective for a while. but people are starting to utilize that as an additional attack surface. Again, this is a watering hole attack that if you go back into the 60s 70s parlance of security vulnerabilities, this is a place where we all go pull libraries from. And so if we misname a library or we hallucinate what a library's name actually is, that can be predicted. And if you predict it and just go do a bunch of typo squatting, or they're calling it slop squatting, right? You basically are just taking a chance that someone is eventually going to come and download that package and run it internal to their system because they're using an AI to actually generate the code. And so, again, like this is a strict, like, kind of maturity issue for an organization, right? Like, how are you actually importing your libraries? Where are you pulling them from? Are you validating them before anything else goes on? And I mean, they've coined this term. And actually, maybe I should just show this article so we can talk through it. What were your thoughts on slop squatting? I think you got to that article.
Yeah, I just read it all actually. So yeah, I mean, like the basic gist here is to attack this anyways is you, I guess, just poison the training set with you know different package names, or alternatively try to run the same prompts that they're exposing to see what package names it generates. They did this against 16 large language models, some popular ones, open source and commercial. So, you know, probably if I'm an attacker, I'm going to look at what are the IDEs that are AI integrated with, what LLMs are they kind of pre-configured to talk to. Those are going to be my big targets. From there, I'd probably use these prompts over and over and over again to extrapolate potential package names. Then from there, I'd probably go and see if any of those package names are actually registered. If they're not, from there at that point forward, I start registering them and I start putting out obviously my own version of that package. So that's very interesting. It's like I've been thinking about this a lot, man. Like with the way things are changing from a development, it's like why are we talking about AI all the time on this podcast? Well, it's like, well, from an AppSec perspective, this is actually like becoming a real. There's yeah, obviously that I've talked about benefits up to this point that I've found in it, but like it's also creating a lot of vulnerabilities and a lot of questions about where does this all go and what attacks are going to be here. And so this is just, to me, first of all, great job, Socket. Good article, really fun to read. Good research. This is really cool. But I suspect there's going to be a lot, not but, and I suspect there's going to be a lot of variations and deviations of like different, yeah, related attacks in this new world of how code's getting developed and deployed and governed and observed and evaluated and connected to. And yeah, things are just, I don't know, it's a little overwhelming at times. I'm constantly trying to think through like, this moving target and where do you feel that, Seth? I mean, like, is it
Oh
just,
yeah,
I assume our viewers and listeners also
yeah.
maybe deal with this. I don't know.
I do, and I get a lot of questions from clients. We've been talking a lot about prompt engineering and how to utilize these tools, right? I mean, one of the things that I keep going back to as well, like I know, like you have said, we've talked a lot about AI and LLMs and security around like supply chains for the AI ecosystem. The reason that this is so relevant to us is because we see the potential, right? Um, the the industry in general is catching up, and if anything, it almost feels like they're passing us by. We're not taking it as seriously as we probably should, but it's getting the attention that it definitely deserves. Things like, I mean, we started talking about Copilot. I should go look in the archives, but we started talking about GitHub Copilot years ago, right? I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure you were still GitHub at the time, and it was an
I
extremely
was.
useful tool. And we started to see the writing on the wall that these tools were going to change development, were going to change application security, and being able to utilize them would only make us more efficient. It did that for developers originally with Copilot, but now we're getting to the point that it's doing it for everyone with the release of ChatGPT, with the AI hype cycle, right? And we're definitely going to come down from this a little bit. It'll start to be normalized. We'll get back to talking about cross-site scripting and other attacks, but the attack surface for applications has changed because of these tools and the way that they're being introduced. So you have to be aware of what's going on with them. And this screen specifically, the fact that I'm seeing both in the same article, I'm seeing an academic paper being referenced and then exploited by a company or watched for by a company within a month of each other, right? Like, this is fascinating to me because it's going so quickly. I guess this is within 6 months, right? But still,
Yeah.
like, that turnaround is incredibly fast. If I think about my experience in application security, typically, right, like if I think back to the cross-site request forgery days, these were attacks that people talked about in the 90s and 2000, the confused deputies attacks that didn't actually make their way into the commercial mindset until the early 2000s, right? Like, we had years between the theoretical uh, attacks and the actual, like, physical attacks that started to happen and discoveries that happened in the commercial space. But it's not that way anymore. The
Yeah.
feedback loop is getting incredibly small, and I think that's where what you're getting at, Ken. It's hard to stay on
Yeah.
top of it. We're trying to help. That's all that we're trying to do, because it's what we're dealing with on a daily basis as well. And selfishly, part of what Ken and I are actually doing here is research live, because it is helping us in our day to day.
Yeah, I have to stay abreast of all this stuff. I mean, it's hard, and that's the challenge I'm facing. Is thankfully my whole job revolves around this ecosystem right now. Well, sometimes thankfully, believe me, I have my moments. No, I'm joking, but no, I mean, so I have developers who are constantly, telling us about the new stuff that's coming out tooling wise. So I'm very close to the developers that are living in this world. So I see this stuff, and immediately my mind's like, kind of like, yeah, I'm of two minds, right? I'm a CTO, so obviously from an engineering perspective, I'm like, yeah, great, let's do this, let's do that. And then I'm also like, for sure, more so a security person, and so I'm also like constantly, thinking about how we responsibly do this, responsibly do that. How do we get ahead of what's gonna be a thing? And like also from a product positioning standpoint, right? You think about like when you're in you and I's shoes and you have products, you're like, well, I want to make sure those things adjust for, So I'm of many minds about this all the time, and yeah, is evident in this content of the podcast lately. But I guess my
Yeah.
real point is it's impacting everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody that watches and listens to this podcast, anybody in the AppSec space, we are now all dealing with. And actually, it's funny because we had talked about vibe coding yesterday, right? And or not yesterday, sorry. We talked about vibe coding for the last couple weeks, really, I think.
Yeah.
But yesterday, I was writing code, and I was like, was kind of a prototypey thing that I was working on. So I was like, I can have a little fun with this. Let me try vibe coding.
Yep.
And like it started off pretty okay. Went off the rails very quickly. I had to dial it back, and like what I found personally, speaking of vibe coding, is that as I got deeper into it, the more things I started, if I didn't keep my instructions very like narrowly scoped to a specific thing, and say I needed to go here and do this exactly, and it should only do this thing, and I had to like, I guess my point is like I was starting to find like how much I was prompting was almost becoming like not worth it, and it was just going back to coding normally at times to fix it. So I don't
Yep.
know. I'm like, that's another one where I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I would. Yeah, it's just like I said, it's just so much research. It's also trying to keep up with everything, and so it's been a ride, man.
Yeah.
And it continue to be
Yep.
for all of us.
Well, and I don't know. I loved this, right? Like, so again, shout out to the socket dev guys, right? Like, so the research is coming out, right? Like, this was, I did show the article for a minute with the full graph of like, okay, an attacker goes and generates code, right? Like, and then they take the libraries that are suggested and compare that to the repositories, like the package repositories, to see what actually exists. Then they go out and register those names. But the fact that 20% of the recommended packages that were generated in those 576,000 code samples for JavaScript and Python did not exist, that's a 1 in 5 chance that one of those libraries or that code is not going to work, just based on the library that is being recommended when you are vibe coding, right? So again, this is that huge security issue that exists there. But kudos to socket.dev for actually going out and running that analysis, as opposed to just like theorizing what's actually going on. The fact that open source models did worse than commercial models was interesting to me as well, especially given our experience with things like Code Llama when it's doing analysis of code and how it goes off the rails. I'm not overly surprised that they actually did worse. But yeah, like very, very interesting research that you're going to want to take into account if you have developers that are doing something like vibe coding. At which point you're probably going to be building in some sort of list of security requirements and acceptable libraries into your prompts that they will be using to do the vibe coding. But that also means that you've got to get some control around the process that they're using for that and the LLMs that are accessible in order to vibe code. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it all goes back to, AAA, right? Like, and like our basics of the basics of security we've got to control what the input actually looks like. We got to make sure that things are authorized. We got to make sure that the validation is occurring on anything that's being generated either by a person or by a computer at this point, because the computer is now as untrusted as a junior developer, basically, right? Like that's, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It, but you're not wrong. It all comes back. All of this really does come back down to the basics. It's trust boundaries. It's user
Mhm.
input versus intended syntactical input. It's network. It's credentials. It's sensitive data exposure. It's all of those things in a different way. But it kind of reminds me of was having this conversation in a jujitsu Slack thread thing, and Boz Alberts, who's at GitHub, was saying like, he's been doing it, I think, over 20 years, and he's like, somebody was asking a question about sort of like, what's changed over the last 20 years, and he's like, well, there's this new thing and this new thing, but ultimately it all comes back down to the same basics and fundamentals that we've had for, and he like listed out what those were, and I'm like, yeah, it's all the same thing. It's all technology. It's all the same kind of stuff at the end of the day. Same sort of flaws, and it really comes down to the same sort of security kind of mindset that we and tactics that we used before. We'll use them again today. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I mean, one of the things that I did want to highlight out of this, and this is out of the research paper as well, these graphs that we've got in front of us. We often get questions when we're talking LLMs and actual use of like interactions with the LLMs and temperature specifically. The hallucination rate versus the temperature. This is exactly what we would expect and what we've experienced, right? The fact that the more that you turn up the temperature, the more creative you allow the LLM to be, which leads to more hallucinations, right? And that's exactly what you're asking it to do in those cases. So again, it's not overly surprising, but it's a good illustration of what's going on there. And then we also have that question from Robert. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
How do you think
I,
code review, standard peer review, not secure code review, is going to be impacted given the new speed of development and volume of code produced for review?
that's a good. So oh man, that's a lot to theorize, and there's a lot of different avenues. But I have some initial thoughts, Seth, and I'd like you to add on to them. So
Okay.
initially, there's a handful, not a handful. It's a growing list of tools that do code reviews. And I don't, and to your point, not secure code reviews. That's a totally different thing. But for secure code review, or excuse me, for regular functional code review, uh, there's these solutions that come out, and like like ellipses.dev or Code Rabbit. There's a whole bunch of them. You can go to like there's AI tool websites. You can see the full list, but what they do is they actually summarize sort of what they have a few things they can do feature wise, right? One is, and I think this is really helpful, is to summarize exactly what is going on in that pull request. That's something we do as well. We stopped doing it in SEM comments. We just show it in the dashboard now because it got to be too no. Basically, if you're the author, you don't want like you don't need to be told like, hey, you did all these things. Like, anyways, point being, if it's a code review, like standard code review tool, however, that's helpful for the peer reviewers to get a synopsis on. Here's like the major kind of 50,000 foot view of what's changing. That's really, really helpful. That's great. There's other features there though too that are. It's kind of like it's just like linting, right? There's so you have usually the features they offer is like, do you want to be really picky? Do you want to be more relaxed? So if you're really picky, they'll give you like a breakdown of every like thing that's changing, summarized, and all of that. They can also like get really picky about standards, similar to linting, but obviously with AI, you go a lot farther than linting, just like you do with security reviews of code. As soon as you get out of the pattern and rule based game and regex, you're like in a whole different world. So that's really nice. The suggestions they give, they'll give some suggestions. They'll usually have a feedback mechanism so that, like, you know, um, hey, I didn't think that what you analyzed on this was correct. So I think you need to know this about this repo or this PR going forward. And so there will usually be some adjustments made by the code review tool and have some stored information about either that repository or that PR to help improve that. The other things they often do is they can be configured to do suggested fixes. And again, this is an area where I see a lot of struggle, and that's true of standard code review tools. That's true of security code review tools that are also trying to put in fixes. If there's one thing I see a lot, it's complaints about from both tools or both categories of tools, the fixes. The fixes are usually, and this is, I have to tell you, I write a tool for developers. You, Seth, and I have worked for decades with developers. It's a picky bunch. It's a picky crowd. So it's tough to hand over an auto-generated remediation or auto-suggested improvement, whatever it may be, and then have somebody immediately want to take that exact code and put it into their code base. Usually they say, okay, thank you, but I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this the way I want to write this. So, and sometimes that's not the case. I'm just giving you what I've observed because I've actually had to go and, do some research on these tools, right? So those are the standard things they offer. And I think when you zoom out, like developers have always had linting tools. They've always had some sort of standards, or they should anyways, that they follow. This is just a far more robust and communicative way to express all of that. How you land there is like as to how the product or the open source tool or whatever it is, however it like actually lands its comments and its interactions and all that, that's what obviously separates them and makes the tool usable or not. But I think overall net benefit. But Seth, there's some open questions, and I want to hear your questions about this, because so like some thoughts, or sorry, I want to hear your thoughts, but here's some things I want to kind of mention to you. One is Robert mentioned like a lot more code being slung. So that's the first thing. Is that good to have AI reviewing potentially AI generated code? Do you see any other sort of weaknesses in this approach? Over reliance, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I kind of go back to is the advent, 20 some odd years ago, of no code, low code tools. Right. This feels very similar, from like vibe coding is very similar to that. And most of the security issues or security features built into those platforms are predicated on actual use of those platforms and understanding of configuration, right? So in the AI world, the vibe coding world, this all goes back to the prompt that you're generating, how you're actually instructing the code to be developed. Um, Given that the developers themselves probably don't have the experience to deal with the underlying mechanisms and the underlying code itself. Uh, yeah, this will also go back to the discussion that we had about having a senior developer that is actually the one that is validating the vibe coding or the output that's coming out, building the requirements. Because if you don't have that experience, you don't know that, hey, there might be a default for this low code platform that allows administrative credentials or developer credentials to actually get into it. And then the more creative that you want the LLM to be, there's more aspects that are going to go into this because it is more flexible over time, right? Like there's no necessarily defined output, as it can be whatever you want it to be as a developer or as a coder. The controls that are built into it are going to be extremely nuanced and difficult to find. So we've almost got to flip from a code review perspective to having those senior developers do the code review and do that sort of analysis as opposed to generating the code up front. And I know this is going to be really difficult because we don't necessarily have that level of coders across the world in most organizations. A lot of code is developed at these organizations by third parties. It's a lot of it's outsourced. You know that they're going to be doing the vibe coding because they want to turn around features as quickly as possible. And there may be, one or two developers that can actually review it on the level that it needs to be reviewed, which means you're overly dependent on the LLMs to analyze the code. And then we're gonna run into issues where we're analyzing code that was generated by the same LLM that we are reviewing or we're using to review that code. So of course it's going to think that it looks good. And I just there's a myriad of problems that start to pop up in my head as far as actually getting the coverage that we want out of this from a strict code review perspective. I love the fact that we can summarize. That is an extremely useful tool from security perspective, from a functionality perspective, as long as it doesn't go off the rails and we don't turn that temperature too far up, and so that it can't actually hallucinate what's going on. But man, I just again, it's a take it with a grain of salt, I guess, is where I'm going with that, right? Like you've got to be wary of anything that is not fully understood that you're deploying to interact with production data and production functions.
Yeah, and because as you were saying that with senior people, because you were saying, well, hey, maybe there's a world in which you've got the senior devs have to basically take over and do a full on review. And then I was thinking, well, what couldn't the LLM give them like our tool does for security stuff, but from a functional perspective, which is hey, there's a little bit of a hotspot there, or even today, like SonarQube, they've got some developer stuff built in, functional, hotspot. Like this is you gotta, I don't know, you didn't account for a null value, we'll say, or whatever it might be. So but then I was thinking well, but then yeah, you're 100% reliant on the LLM, which is probably I'm torn about it, right? Because I'm I rely on me personally, I rely on that very heavily, but at the same time, I understand there's almost an idea of what we do, which is classifying the kind of change to then determine what kind of things could be more problematic and calling that out, I think. But yeah, without a dev, basically what I'm saying is things could be missed. Though that's true of linting, that's true of even manual code reviews. So it's a philosophical thing that obviously I wrestle with all the time. But yeah, I mean, overall, I will say this: I had for a while, I had been putting on, like I had mentioned before, on our PR comments, like on the comments themselves, which we removed at um, for simplicity. But we used to put on the comments like, here's the functional like change or whatever summary, like a few sentences, and that was actually really helpful for me to even just know like what is the freaking purpose of this PR. Sometimes we got PRs flying pretty fast that don't even have like great descriptions, and honestly, just having like that thing being give a description is like valuable. So I don't know. I think it's a net win, but also I see the dangers in, it's probably gonna be true of everything, right? The more we outsource to other to non-human to non-humans, we'll see where it all goes, right? But
Yeah.
I did want to see his other question here. Do you think SOC's dual controls are going to have to change? I'm not sure we have strong assertions about 2+ people reviewing is necessarily true anymore, given LLM generated code is opaque. We have strong assertions about 2+ people reviewing, given LLM generated code is opaque. I mean, you still. So I think what you're saying is like, for instance, most compliance related controls have a change. Well, not necessarily true, but usually they want you to have a change control mechanism in place. So like so for example, GitHub's ability to say, hey, you have to have at least one or more required approvals to merge your PR into the code base, and you can't do force pushes or whatever it might be, that
Mhm.
protects your code base. That being something that maybe is less of a thing. I would argue that's not the case. And the reason I would say that is that, at least with our tool, we do a lot of alerting as well, or not a lot, but like when necessary, we alert folks. And if configured, we can block as well. Um, and I think for your standard code review tools, you want that as well, right? I mean, if that says like, hey,
Well,
like this code, wait, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
no, I mean, I think what he's not necessarily, you're on the right track because SOX has a requirement that anything that is like financially relevant from a code perspective has to have two reviewers that aren't the people that wrote the code. That's basically what it boils down to. That's that dual control. And yeah, like whether or not that's relevant or whether or not you could pass off an LLM as one of those people, is probably, I don't
No,
know.
that's my point. No, use the
Yeah,
tool for alerting and guidance.
yeah.
But I wouldn't ever suggest just never like just saying, no, that is my approved my required approval.
Mhm.
If that's what we're saying, Seth, then I would not do
Yeah,
that personally. What would you
yeah.
do?
No, I wouldn't either, right? Like that's where I go to. We're pushing these experienced developers into those roles where they're the ones that are having to give the manual sign off on things, or they can use those tools to help them point in a specific direction, especially with the amount of code that's being generated. Uh, but again, I would start to balance the large models off of each other. Um, Code generated is in the same commit, but I can't guarantee I've read all the LLM generated code, so it's possible only one person has reviewed it. Yeah. Um, oof.
I think we're in is code I write and code generated by an LLM is in the same commit, but I can't guarantee I have read all LLM generated code. So it's possible only one. Oh, well, I mean, I don't
Ooh.
think the person that writes the code, though, should ever be the person that's responsible for reviewing it. So if there's 2+ reviewers required, it should never be the author of the PR that's the reviewer, which is, I think, what we're saying here.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
I couldn't
yeah.
count you looking at what was generated by the LLM code as part
As
of
a
your, like, I don't care, right? Like, I don't care if you wrote half of it and the other part was LLM generated. I wouldn't care personally. I'd just be like, you're the author, period. Like, you put that code up there, that's you. Regardless of who generated it, you drove that. This is you're the owner, right? You're the this ownership, right? That's you. So reviewers cannot be you. That's my point.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to have to get to, right? But he's absolutely right as far as like, reviewing the LLM generated code, depending on how much you're actually slinging, you may not dig into it as much as you probably should, just from a pure time perspective and a pressure perspective, when you are generating features, you're generating code at a very quick pace. The amount of code is going to increase. So we've got to figure out ways to approach that from a review perspective, taking security out of it in general, but just a pure, review perspective that allow us to get that same coverage. Yeah. Cool. Let's see.
I know you have a
In
hard stop,
Slack,
so
yeah, I do. I did want to drop this in as to put a bow on one of these conversations, right? Get GoPilot or Copilot, not GoPilot, now actually has the ability to send custom instructions to Copilot for their, for consumption or for use, right? I'm using Copilot. You can actually give it, and it looks like natural language customization that allows it to say, hey, for security related questions, always go to this place, always refer to the primer, but you could also include some of the only use this list of pre-approved dependencies to get around some of the dependency hallucinations that we were seeing in the other article. And I would like to see that pushed even further. Yeah. What were you going to say?
This is going to be a new LLM SBOM, like preemptive SBOM. It's not an SBOM like telling you what you have installed, but it's an SBOM telling you what you're allowed to install.
We can't tell. Yep, basically. I mean, we've done that for years with Artifactory and other dependencies, right? Like,
Sure,
it's like, okay,
same
these are
thing,
improved for your
right?
organization. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing, right? Like, yes, this is something I've been dealing with since early 2000s. Yes, exactly. Yes, I'm old. Welcome to the podcast.
I hope your pinky feels better also, by the way, for those that don't know.
Yeah, that was
Seth
you
wrecked
can
his
see
pinky.
it. The pinky, yeah. So don't stand behind a net when the team is doing don't stand beside the goal when the team is doing shooting practice and not pay attention to what's going on. That's my takeaway from yesterday. Yeah. Cool.
Good takeaway.
Good takeaway. Yeah.
Painful lesson.
All right. Painful lesson to learn. Great. Well, thanks to everyone for joining today. Thanks for the comments. We'll continue this. If you are going to be at B-Sides or RSA, please reach out. Would love to meet up with you. We'll be doing, I'm sure, open happy hour, meeting people on Monday after the Aegis event. So even if you can't attend that, we will be, we'll put it in Slack where we're actually going to be. But B-Sides, I'd love to meet people as well. If you're going to be there, I know some people have already reached out. But otherwise, any last minute thoughts, Ken, before we call it for today?
As always, thank you to listeners and viewers of the podcast. Please remember that May 12th and 13th, we do have our practical secure code review course, and you get a lot out of it. So 2-day virtual course. If you're interested, if you think somebody else might be interested, if you're especially a consultancy as well, a good place to send your folks. So anyways, but thank you, everybody. And thank you, Seth, for another good episode and your time.
Okay. All right. See everybody online. Thank you.